OrangeTrail itself obviously practices what they preach, because OrangeTrail had 4 teams in the top 200 out of the 100,000 we benchmarked. What was really interesting when I spoke with Jaap is those 4 teams just happened to be the 4 projects that OrangeTrail was working on during that 3-month period. So I know when we spoke, Jaap, you were saying, well, if it was a different, if we benchmarked right now, whatever projects you'd be working on, it'd be those 4 teams as well. So really impressive. Jaap, I'm going to hand over to you, and Jaap's going to give you some tips for success, as you can see there, but also share a little bit of the team's journey that you guys do at OrangeTrail, as I said, practicing what you preach.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. And so start off, I think you guys did a fantastic job with the report. I was really impressed, and I'm honored to be recognized as a high-performing team in that sense. And it's nice to sort of have that recognition because we say so that we do this, but it's somebody else telling you that you're actually doing it is a nice principle. So thanks for that. Yeah, what I want to do with you guys is to just give you some 4 practical tips or 4 tips that we have, but really take you, and those will be the next slides that will be coming, into how we work and how that dynamic is created really. And I think so. The first 4 tips to start off with that is working out loud is really the game-changing principle that we're looking at right now. I think working out loud is, to me, it's similar as this whole agile wave that went through the workplace. This is, in my mind, this is really going to be the big game changer. And that's what companies, if they're really interested in boosting productivity with these tools that are out there, that's what they should focus on. And that brings me to the second point. They don't. Basically, what happens is a fool with a tool is still a fool. And this sounds harsh, but it also sounds nice because it rhymes. But what I'm trying to say there is that most companies actually, they focus on replacing some piece of technology. A lot of companies out there have basically introduced Teams as a migration from Skype. So then it becomes a meeting platform. You see, we're going to reduce email, and you guys said that as well. What are people going to do? They're going to chat. And this is a principle that we see everywhere, is people don't like to change. And if you really look at it, we're working in the same way as we did 100 years ago. And I'm going to show you a more detailed example of that. But we're still sitting and working on a typewriter. It has a screen, it has a keyboard, but it's still a typewriter. We're still typing. It's a virtual piece of paper. We're doing exactly the same thing as we're doing 100 years ago. And that's where we need to change. And that's why we're not progressing in that sense. We're still stuck in meetings and all of that. Sorry, I'm starting to go off on a rant. But what we see happening in the market is, and we call that feeding clients sugar. Clients say, just tell me how it works. And a lot of people that introduce this technology do exactly that. They just show them how it works. How do you set up a meeting? How do you do chat? How do you post a message? They don't explain how it will introduce or increase productivity. And so there's the key. Another part that's really important when you start to work on this is structure. And I'll show you some examples of non-structure and structure in some slides later on. But structure is key. If you don't structure your work well, stuff gets lost, people miss stuff, and it starts to become noisy. So structure is key, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then we talked a little bit about it, and the chat was full of it as well. But in my mind, chat is just for logistics. So I'm going to lunch. That was a good example. Stuff, today I'm going to be working about these things, or I'm off to this client meeting. So logistical stuff. But as soon as it's connected to things you're working on the longer term, it should be in a threaded conversation, and it's working out loud instead of just a chat. And chat is just like email. It's where knowledge goes to die. It just flies away, and you'll never find it. So go easy on the chat and go on the thread. So the next slide that I'll talk, what I'm showing you, is an example actually of us still working, in an old-fashioned way. And this is what we call the library concept. And people like libraries. We've had libraries 30,000 years ago. We put clay tablets in them back then. That's progressed to paper, so we could have more in the library, and it's progressed to digital, and we could have even more. And the thing you see on the left is what a lot of shared folders in companies look like. There's project plan 0.1, 0.3, then Bob has a version, Willie has a version, then there at some point there's 3.0 final, 3.0 really final, and often there's also 3.0 really final Willie. Anyway, you get the point. What's missing here is why and how these things change. What's the reason? What's the difference between Willie's version and Bob's version? That's not captured in most organizations. That flies up in the air in meetings, in emails, in chat, but it's lost. All that contextual information is lost to companies. And it's actually, everybody when it talks about knowledge management, everybody talks about we need to capture tacit knowledge. That's exactly what's lost. And the reason for it is we work in this way. If you start to work out loud, which is the example on the right, you capture it basically. So what happens on the right is Matan Tal starts a project and he needs to create a business case. And he says, I'm going to create this business case. This is the reason why. And here's the document I'm going to be working in. And then as time progresses, other people contribute to the document. They call in each other. And this is how the document progresses. The nice thing is that at some point when this document's finished, and at the bottom you can see a decision is made, somebody can read this thread and actually knows what's happened, why this document is there, and why this decision was made. And this is the big change in that sense that we should start to make. So this is a big game changer, and this is just one example, but there's more examples of how you should change the way you work. So how does this working out loud actually work in practice? So it's the same example as we just had, and what you do is you start on top with a description if you're responsible for a certain delivery, a deliverable, or a client, or a case, or an innovation, whatever. Your company is full of these topics. You start by describing what you want. If there's a document involved, you attach the document that people can then use to work on, put it in a shared space, and you call out the people that you want something from. And then this process starts, and as people work on it, this thing is updated and they say what they've done to the document.
And calling out, Jaap, in talking like at mentioning people, at mentioning teams if need be, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you pull in people to the conversation. That's a key thing as well to get conversations lively as well. An important thing to do when you're working out loud, which is point 4, is to close the loop. So if something's done, to make sure that something's done, and also if you ask people for contributions to show what you've done with the contribution. And then the last point, number 5, is that if you work in this way, emails disappear. And the nice thing about this working out loud, this is, if you look at this is very clear. It's very clear how things happened. It's all linear and you can read it. If this would happen in email, it would have been 50 emails, reply to alls, people replying to each other. So you'd have lost complete overview of what was happening. And if you work out loud, it's very nice and clear. The other nice thing about doing it in this way is all of these types of things are generally talked about in meetings. But if you work out loud well, everybody's on board. So what happens is your agenda items on your meeting start to disappear and your meeting starts to become shorter if you work in this way. So the next slide will show you a little bit. I'm waiting for to see the next. Yep, there we go. There are tons of applications for working out loud, and this is just a couple of examples. So what you see here is an update to colleagues and collecting input on something. So Quinn is negotiating training improvements. You can co-create and review deliverables. We've talked about this in the previous slide as well. But Judith is creating an onboarding document for new colleagues, and she's inviting other people to contribute to it. But it's also very useful to build agendas for meetings. So what you see here is that you see in the title, you see the date of the meeting, and then you see links to other threaded conversations that are then agenda items. And what people do to prepare for the meetings, they click on the link, they see the thread, read it, and they're prepared. So what makes this happen is also that people come to meetings more prepared, but also very often, if they have an opinion about something that's on the agenda, they just put it in a response. So very often things that are on the agenda disappear before the meeting even happens. So the next slide is about the structure.
Yep. Can I just
Yeah.
We've got a really good question come in from Andrew. Andrew, did you want to ask this yourself, just in relation to finishing the threads that you were, or what happens when the, closing off? Well, anyway, Andrew, do you want to jump in and ask the question?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
It's just that, we have lots of threads. For example, if you have a Teams for a project, and you've got threads about how the project went and different discussions, when the project closes and you want to archive it, what happens is the documents, yes, you can archive them in another place, but what we're finding a problem is that within Teams, you cannot archive the chat. And you can copy it, you can screenshot it, but there isn't a mechanism to archive it or store that knowledge. Do you have that experience?
Yes, I have, but I think I'm not. What is the reason to archive? Why don't we just let it exist? If it's not lively anymore, it's not gonna be in your in your where you're working, and it's just gonna sit somewhere. What you can do in Teams is you can hide certain projects, so they'll just slip off your active screen at the moment, but they're still there, and that means you can still, if you search, you can still find them, and it's still there. I think it's something I guess the archiving thought comes from cleaning your desk that we did in the past. So you had all this stuff on your desk and you needed space to work. But what happens in the digital space is that these things, if you don't work on them, they sort of drop off the space that you're working in. So I don't think you need to archive in that sense. I would just right click on the team, and you can hide it. And the same goes for channels. I have an example in the next slide. For big clients, we keep one team for a client, and the projects roll on with channels. So we create new channels for projects, and we just hide the old ones, but they still exist. So my solution would be just forget about archiving it, and move on and hide them.
Does that not interfere with if you're doing a search, because you're going to have hundreds of? Would that have an impact on search? If you ever look for something, you'd get all this other spurious information that may not be related to current projects?
Yes, you would get if you search, but to me, I don't know. If I search, it's generally to find stuff in old projects, because I'm quite aware of the stuff that's going on in the projects that are running. It's generally, if I'm looking for a PowerPoint presentation we did 2 years ago, that's sort of when I search. But yes, it is that would happen. So okay, if you search, you do get stuff that's older, and if that's an issue, then I guess you do want to clean up. But to be honest, I think that's actually nice to be able to find things that you did in the past. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Getting back on track. So discipline and structure, and what you see here are two examples, and what you see on the left side is something we see a lot at people that start off with Teams. They just dump documents in there with a lot of descriptions, and the whole, what we call activity stream, is just fragmentation of things that people just dump in there. And it's used more in a manner of chat than it is in a structured way of working. And what you see on the right is actually, in this case, I've even beefed up the heading a little bit by using the announcement feature. But you can really, if you work in this way and use titles well for the threads, you really start to have a nice overview of all the key things, the key threads that are in there. And it starts to become really easy to follow this. So structure your threads properly, have good titles that describe what's in them. And you can even use the announcement to make it even bigger and bolder and more colorful. So this is the structure. Then the other part about structure is the channels. The first thing to say about channels is what we tend to do is if we have a project, we sort of create a channel per work stream. So and those can be big deliverables or workshops or whatever. But so the key big things that we're working on get their own channel. So that's the first thing that we do. Something that I've put in this slide is practical considerations when things start to move on. What I just mentioned as well is what you see on top is that, for example, for our client Friesland Campina, we do multiple projects. So what you see here is most of the channels that we have for them. So you see that we did a project in 2019 about Microsoft Teams, and you see the channels for that. And then you see that 2 years later, we're launching Yammer at this company, and that has 4 work streams. So this is how we, for example, roll on with the channels within a certain client setting. So this is a way you can progress without creating a new team every time for a client. Something we also do is for our smaller projects, we don't want to create a teams per, if we do a workshop for one company, we don't want to create a whole team for that one workshop. So what we have is also a teams, and it's called one channel projects. And what you see here are 3 of the small projects that we're working on right now in the company. And the whole project is one channel, and the threads will contain the stuff that's happening in there. So that's a way to work with the different sizes of the projects that you'll be working in, and if they're longer or shorter types of projects. But this is a practical example. Yep, last one.
Yes, many. We probably just considering time. I know people probably got to go somewhere to go. So I might just. Is there a last slide you want to show before we?
Yeah. So the very last. So when I look at SWOOP, it's the network side. Something that we see. You see 2 projects that are happening in our company right now, and the one at the bottom right is a project, and I've taken the people out. That has a problem, and you see the problems in the right or the left bottom corner. There's somebody that's not really connected. So this is a way that I actually look at how teams are doing, and the one at the top right is a team that is very healthy. You see a core team of 2 people that are doing most of the work driving it. You see them very connected, and then you see top right and middle bottom. Those are 2 designers. So they're less connected, but they're connected. This is fine. I'm connected to some extent. And then you see a person that's just joined the team on the bottom right. So she's just getting involved in it. So this is a team that is healthy. So you can very quickly, using this type of network vision, look at how the team is performing and if people are actually part of what's happening in the team. So this is a little example of how I use SWOOP